If you look at the history of various industries or individual companies, it starts off with one or two crazy people with crazy ideas. Apple Computer, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. These guys were totally out of their minds. They decided that ordinary working Americans would like to have personal computers when any sensible person would have told them you have to be a business or a university to need a personal computer. And in the course of that, these two guys created an industry that now has 20 million personal computers, probably more than that by now, in the United States of America alone. They must have been a wacko. But it also turns out they were right. And they tried, and they worked in a garage like good American inventors, and they made something conceptual into something very real and also very, very remunerative. So, yeah, what else is there to say? Back in 1986, when I went to England for the first time to research Patriot Games, I had breakfast with Jack Higgins. His real name's Harry Patterson. He was an instructor in literature at Oxford University, and he's a heck of a nice guy, a very smart guy. And he liked Red October, and so he wanted to meet me and have breakfast. We had the same publisher in England. So in the course of breakfast, he said, "You know, kid." So I had one book under my belt then. And he was the old pro telling the youngster how to do things. So I'm going to tell you something, kid. Something happened to me, and I hope you learn from it, because it's sure as hell going to happen to you. So he was walking down either Piccadilly or the Strand, a fashionable street in London, and this elderly lady bumps up to him and says, "You're Jack Higgins." "Yes, ma'am." "You saved my life." "Excuse me?" And then the lady explained that she had been in the hospital. She had cancer. She was in for a major surgical procedure. She was, of course, not feeling terribly well. She was quite depressed, contemplating death. And one of the nurses, or a social worker, someone in the hospital, gave her a book to read, and it was one of Jack's books, Harry's books. And she liked it, and she read another one, and another one, and another one. And reading those books allowed her to escape from where she was and to think about things other than her own misery. And as a result of that, she said that she survived something she otherwise would not have survived. And Jack says, I just didn't know what the hell I was supposed to say to her, except I'm glad that I was of service to you. And Tom, it's going to happen to you, and you'd better think about it ahead of time. You better know what to say. Well, he was right. I've gotten letters like that. I've had people come up to me and tell me that. And that is what convinces me that I'm in an honorable profession that does useful things. Maybe the best scene I ever wrote is in Patriot Games, where Jack Ryan's daughter is in the hospital, and she's been seriously injured in a murder attempt. And Jack is downstairs waiting to see if she's going to survive or not. So the scene shifts to the doc, and he gets the printout from the blood gas analyzer, checking on liver function to see if her liver is going to survive the trauma or not. And he hands the printout to the nurse practitioner and says, "You want to go tell the family?" The doc walks out of the critical care recovery unit to the stairwell and trudges up the stairs to the roof of the shock trauma building in Baltimore. And he pulls out a cigarette and lights it. And he looks north, and north of that hospital in Baltimore is the home of Edgar Allan Poe. And it turns out that this doctor is a tiny bit crazy. He is in a high-stress profession where he deals with trauma patients on a daily basis. And he has this little mental game he plays with himself, that his enemy is embodied by Edgar Allan Poe, who wrote principally about untimely death and just about everything he put on paper. And so he looks at the house where Poe lived, and down at the street where Poe, where he collapsed drunk in a gutter and ultimately caught pneumonia, from which he died. And he looks at the house and he says, "You son of a bitch. You don't get this one. This one goes home." Flips away the cigarette. Goes back downstairs to get some sleep. I've had more people call me, particularly doctors, to tell me they cry when they read that, which is about the best compliment that anybody can give you. Because it is a fight between good and evil, and I'm just one of the people who happens to believe that that good ultimately wins, because good is ultimately stronger. And if that were not true, how come we're not living in caves? When I screw up big league, okay? So what? I'm not afraid to appear foolish once in a while. It's not going to diminish the person that I am. Yeah, I'd like as I said, the only thing I'm afraid of is not trying. And if it means looking dumb once in a while, so what? The people who are going to, the most